What are some things you like and don't like about attending an Ivy League adjacent school? How did you get your neurosurgical observership in high school? What does a neuroscience degree look like? How does pre-med look at Columbia and Barnard? What can you do with a neuroscience degree? Hello. I've always wanted to do ASMR, and this is probably the closest I'm ever gonna get, so hello and welcome to my very first Q&A video. I'm going to be answering a lot of the questions that I get most frequently from my comments on TikTok and my Instagram DMs. So if you're from TikTok, welcome back. If you asked a bunch of questions in my comments, this is the video where I will be answering those questions. Just a bit of background in case you're new. I am a senior at Barnard College of Columbia University. I'm studying neuroscience on a pre-med track. And I currently work as a neuroscience researcher during the school year and an EMT during the summer. I'm also a big advocate for mental health reform because I have bipolar disorder. I think we should just dive into our first question, shall we? Okay, let's go. Our first question comes from Sadie, and Sadie says, "What can you do with a neuroscience degree? I was thinking of majoring in neuroscience, but I wasn't sure if I could get a good job with the degree without going to get a PhD or an MD." That's a great question. You could do a lot of things with a neuro degree. It's very flexible. You could go the standard MD route and get your MD and become a neurologist, or you could be any other specialty within the medical field with a neuroscience undergraduate degree. You could also get your PhD and go into research. That could be like anything from psychology research you can go into, to neuroscience research, to molecular biology research. So there's a lot of options even within just the research field. Now that's for the PhD or the MD. If you wanted to go for a non-PhD MD route, you could go into neuro law and get your law degree. Actually, one of my roommates is planning on doing this, and it's a route that not a lot of people know about, but it's a route that you can take. So that would be using your knowledge of like psychology and neuroscience to win court cases. You could also go the psychology route because neuroscientists also have a strong background in psychology, and you could become a psychologist or a psychiatrist or a therapist. You could also go into molecular biology research without a PhD as a lab tech. I know a lot of people who are currently lab techs. I'm not a wet lab tech right now, but I do work in a research lab. But you can work as a lab tech with the skills that you learn in your neuroscience degree, because in the neuro degree, you have to take a neuroscience lab and you learn all of these molecular biology lab techniques and lab skills that you can then implement in a job like that. You could also combine your neuroscience degree with a CMA or a CNA, so a certified medical assistant degree or a certified nursing assistant degree, and you could become a medical assistant or a CNA. And then you get to work in a doctor's office doing vital signs and phlebotomy and helping with the flow of patients in the office. And that's a cool sort of like pre-medical job. That's something that I'm looking into doing between medical school and undergrad. You could also go into forensic neuroscience, so working for police departments and analyzing the neurological behaviors of criminals, sort of like the BAU in Criminal Minds, although it's not like that in real life, I'm sure. Or you could do, I saw a job opening recently in forensic neuroscience that was, the whole job was looking at brains of people who are post-mortem for murder cases. So that was really cool. That's also an option if you don't mind looking at the brains of dead people. Also, on the computer science side of things, you could be a computer scientist in a lab, in a research lab that is mapping out the brain circuits. The neurological circuits of the brain in the fruit fly have been completely mapped out, I think. But they're trying to do that with, I think, both the mouse and the human brain. I don't think they've done it with the mouse yet, but they're closer with the mouse than with the human, obviously. But you could work as a computer scientist doing theoretical models of the neurological circuits in the brain. You could also go the route of becoming a professor, and you could teach neuroscience or psychology, but this does require a PhD. So those are some of the many, many, many things that you can do with a neuroscience degree. There's a lot of variability in the different things that you can do. You can go into a more molecular side of things, or a behavioral side of things, or a computer science side of things. So there's a lot that you can do. It's not just cut and dry in terms of a medical degree or a PhD. Let's look for our next question. Okay, our next question is from Ella, and Ella asks, what does a neuroscience degree look like? What classes do you take, and what are the requirements? Well, there are 3 pathways that you can take in a neuroscience degree. At my college, you can either take a molecular neuroscience pathway, a behavioral neuroscience pathway, or a computer science neuroscience pathway. You take classes looking at neuroscience from big to small, so no matter what your pathway is, you're going to take cellular neuroscience and systems and behavioral neuroscience. And you're going to look at the whole brain, actually a brain, in neuroscience lab. So you take neuroanatomy lab, where you learn about all the different parts of the brain, how to dissect the brain, how to do immunohistochemistry, different staining methods. That's a big basis of the neuroscience major. You also do your senior thesis, which is where you devise your own research project within a lab, and you carry it out over the course of a year, and you write a paper about it and give a poster presentation at the end of the year. Ella also asked, what are some pros and cons of a neuroscience degree? Well, some pros are that it's a very flexible degree. It also gives you a scientific basis for the way humans are. So I've always really enjoyed psychology and neuroscience, and I got into neuroscience because I used to be into psychology. But I really like neuroscience because it is not just a psychological basis, but also a biological basis. Neuroscience is at the intersection of psychology, chemistry, and biology, so it's very much a hard science discipline. But it's cool in that we get to mesh all of the things from those disciplines into our understanding of the brain and how things work. Chemistry, you look into sodium channels and the movement of ions in axon signaling and axon terminals, and the movement of neurotransmitters, which are chemicals in the brain that do specific things. And in behavioral neuroscience, you get to look at a more psychological basis of things. So, what motivates people, what causes hunger. So it's a very flexible discipline, and you can look into anything on the spectrum of chemistry, biology, and psychology. Also, it does help that it makes you sound like a genius. I feel like people, even though when you start studying neuroscience, you're like, oh yeah, this is just like a mix of sciences. This isn't like some crazy, some crazy new discipline that's incredibly hard to grasp. It's just a mix of things. But people generally consider it to be oh my God, you study neuroscience, whoa, the brain. So that's always a plus, because it makes you sound like a genius, even if you feel like you aren't when you're studying this degree. A con, I would say, is that because it's at the intersection of chemistry, biology, and psychology, if you don't have a good grasp on any of those 3 things, or really any of the sciences, it can be difficult, because there's so much of each of those things involved in knowing all of the hierarchies of the brain, from the very small cellular level to the very large interpersonal level. Or societal level, that if you miss a step in there with not really knowing a lot about one of the sciences, or you don't have a good background in chemistry, or you don't have a good background in psychology, it can really be difficult to understand the neuroscientific concepts. Our next question is from Sarah, and Sarah asks, what are some things you like and don't like about attending an Ivy League adjacent school? Great question, and I'd love to spill some tea about this, because I have some opinions. The pros, I would say, of attending an Ivy League school are the ones that you all think of. You're attending a school that has tons of funding, and specifically Columbia and Barnard have this huge research endowment, and that's used to enable you to get research opportunities, to work in labs, to do all of this undergraduate experience before you're even out getting a job. So you can enter the workforce with years of experience. And that's priceless. Also, there's the prestige that comes with going to a school like this, where you just say the name of the school or you put it on your resume and people automatically think, oh, this person went to like a very academically rigorous school. They must be very smart. They must be very capable. They must have gotten a very good education. These are all things that are helpful when it comes to applying to jobs, applying to scholarships, etc. And also, there are tons of Columbia and Barnard related institutions where you can get experience pre-grad. So like, for example, in the neuroscience degree, it's the Zuckerman Institute, the Columbia Medical Center. There are tons of places where you can get medical experience and lab experience as an undergrad. Now for some cons. Everyone, when they're applying to college, they're like trying to apply to the best colleges and the ones that they think will make their degree look best or make them look the best on paper for jobs. When I was applying to colleges, I got a little bit carried away with the academic rigor of the institutions I was applying to and how it looked on paper. And I didn't really think when applying about how the institutions I was applying to were academically rigorous for a reason. They were the top of the world rankings for a reason. And I think a lot of people have that little shock moment when they get to Columbia where they're like, okay, I was aware that this is a really difficult school and it's really hard, and I'm going to be put under a lot of stress and there's a lot of pressure and everybody's really competitive. You go into it aware of that. But even if you're aware of that when you go into it, it doesn't really prepare you for the reality of being in it and just how stressful and competitive it is to be in it. And it can be really hard to deal with the pressure here because there is a lot of pressure to succeed. And most people who go to this school are people who have never failed before in their life. Like, we all came in with perfect GPAs, perfect grades, and this might be the first time in our lives that we're actually failing or doing poorly because it's so academically rigorous. When I came into college, I came in with not only advanced placement experience, but also I had an international baccalaureate degree. So I thought I would be really prepared for college, and I'd heard stories of people who graduated with an IB diploma. And I'd heard that their college experiences were so easy and it was a breeze because they had been in the IB diploma program. And so I went into it thinking, oh, I'm really prepared for college more than a lot of people. And so maybe this will be easy for me. And it wasn't easy for me. College has been really hard for me. I saw a side chat post recently that was like, freshmen, the sooner you realize you can't do all your readings and it's physically impossible, the quicker you will find peace. And I think that is so incredibly accurate. I would recommend that if you're looking to apply to an academically rigorous institution like Columbia, that you go into it, prepared that it's going to be really hard. No matter how prepared you are for it, it's going to be probably one of the most difficult things academically that you've ever done. And B, take everything with a grain of salt. Everyone here is failing for the first time, and nobody here is talking about how they're failing for the first time. And so don't feel like you're alone in the fact that you're failing for the first time, because you're not. So that's the con about it being academically rigorous, which I'm pretty sure people in the comments are going to be like, oh, you should have known, like, it's Columbia. And like I did, you go into it knowing, but you don't really know until you're like experiencing it and you're like, oh shit, what did I get myself into? Another con, at least at Barnard, I don't know if it's as bad at Columbia, but at Barnard, there is such a culture of 1%ers here that can be really hard to swallow, especially if you're a low-income student like myself. It can just be a little bit of a shock to come from not a lot and be surrounded by people who have everything. So that's another con. That isn't to say that everyone here is like stuck up or that they're all going to make you feel bad for being low income. I have plenty of friends who are in the 1% and they're all very kind. And they understand their privilege and they don't flaunt their wealth as a result, which is very nice. So it's not everyone. And my final con is that, at least at Barnard, and this might be specific to the neuroscience major, but there are certain major requirements that aren't addressed until you actually declare your major. And they're major requirements that can be really difficult for for financial aid or first generation low income students to fulfill. For example, for the neuroscience major, I wasn't told until after I declared my major that when you get your diploma, you need to have at least 2 to 3 years of research experience to do your thesis and get your neuroscience diploma. And this was a difficult thing for me because research positions in labs are often unpaid. So I had to work for 3 years in a lab without getting paid, which is really difficult when you're low income because if you're going to spend your time working, you need to be making money off of that. Like your time as a low income student is so valuable and you need to monetize it in order to survive and pay for your college and pay for your food and rent and everything. And so it's really difficult to have to work for 3 years with no compensation whatsoever. I had to make the very hard decision of, yes, I really want this neuroscience degree. I believe that this degree will ensure me success in the future, and therefore I am willing to work for 3 years without pay now so that I am successful in the future. I just had to make that quantifying decision. I think we have time for 2 more questions, I think. Izzy is our next question person. Izzy says, how did you get your neurosurgical observership in high school? Great question. If you're here from TikTok, you may have seen a couple videos that I've made on TikTok about how when I was in high school, I did a neurosurgical internship and I watched brain surgery, open heart surgery, and plastic surgery for 30 days. It was very cool. And I learned a lot. Number one, I learned that I don't want to do surgical. Not a neurosurgical person at all. Because I prefer my patients to be awake and for me to be able to talk to them a lot and interact with them and get to know them. So it's no fun for me when my patients are just unconscious the whole time. But back to the question. I want to preface my advice about high school internships by saying that I was extremely lucky to find this specific program that let me actually watch brain surgery in the operating room. I'm not certain. I don't know about any statistics about how prevalent these programs are or how many of these programs there are in hospitals nationwide. Have no idea. This could be one of just a few, or it could be one of many, and this could be a thing that's like very common. Don't know. But I will tell you how I got this internship. So I got this internship by cold emailing doctors' offices and hospitals, and also cold calling doctors' offices and hospitals, and just introducing myself. Hey, I'm a high school student. I'm really interested in becoming a doctor, specifically a neurologist, and I would love to shadow you. And I just sent that email to a bunch of doctors' offices, a bunch of hospitals, including the Walter Reed National Military Medical Center, which is where I ended up doing my shadowing time. And I did this for so many medical professionals, so many. And a lot of them didn't reply. And it's just about being stubborn and persistent and just emailing and emailing and emailing. When they don't respond, you email again. It's all about research and being persistent. So that was how I got that specific internship. I'm just a big believer that the people who ask for help are the ones who will get more opportunities. So don't be afraid to put yourself out there and ask, like, every medical professional that you know. Do you have, like, if you have doctors in your family, or if you have a pediatrician, or you have a neurologist, or you have so-and-so doctor, going up to them and asking them, like, hey, I would really love to shadow you and get to know what it's like to be you, because I would like to be you. And you can always, like, suck up to them a little bit and be like, you know, like, I would really love to shadow you because, like, you inspire me so much, and I would love to do the job that you're doing every day, and blah, blah, blah. You know, you can sugarcoat it a little bit. That always helps. But yeah, be persistent and do your research. Okay. This next question is from Abby. And Abby says, how does pre-med look at Columbia and Barnard? Great question. So our pre-med curriculum is less of a requirement and more of a series of suggestions. And this is because all med schools, or maybe not all med schools, but lots of med schools have different requirements. Some require anatomy and physiology, some require more English, some require more math, some require biochemistry and some don't. So it really depends on the med school. So our requirements that we have listed on our pre-health page is it's a suggestion of what most med schools are looking for. That being said, this is the list of things that are required at Columbia and Barnard to be pre-med. Okay, this is going to be a very long list. Here we go. All right, 2 semesters of biology. So you have cell and molecular biology and organismal biology. Both of those should be taken with a lab. You also have 2 semesters of physics, so Physics 1, Mechanics, and Physics 2, Electricity and Magnetism. Both of those should also be taken with a lab. Then you have 5 semesters of chemistry, 2 of which have to be taken with a lab. So you have General Chemistry, Organic Chemistry 1, Organic Chemistry 2, Biochemistry, and Inorganic Chemistry. Then you have 1 semester of Psychology. Uh-oh. My frickin' camera died in the middle of that. Where were we? Oh yeah, 5 semesters of chemistry, 2 with lab. Also 1 semester of psychology, 2 semesters of math, so 1 statistics, 1 calculus, and 2 semesters of English. So that's a lot of things. Oh, and also some med schools require anatomy and physiology. I desperately need some coffee. I haven't had my coffee yet this morning. Hold on. Is that ASMR? I've been thinking, okay, like, full disclosure, I've been thinking about doing, in order to practice for my upcoming EMT exam that I have, I've been thinking of practicing the patient assessment and the medical assessment and the trauma assessment, but ASMR style, and doing like an ASMR trauma assessment, ASMR medical assessment. I feel like that would be so fun. So let me know in the comments if you want to see that, because I think that would be so fun, and also entirely selfish because it would be me practicing for my exam. Let's move on to our last question. Our last question is one that I get all the time on my comments on my TikTok videos. So it's not by a specific person, but rather by a large audience of people who appear to not understand how bipolar disorder works. So these people ask, how is it possible that you can be a medical professional if you're bipolar? Specifically, a lot of times they ask, won't that impact the quality of treatment that you can provide for your patients? And the answer is no, it won't. That's it, the end. And slate. I get a ton of comments saying that bipolar people aren't fit to be doctors. And while I don't deny that bipolar is a pretty severe condition, it's actually very common, and it's also treatable. And furthermore, because bipolar disorder is treatable, there's no reason that bipolar individuals shouldn't be doctors if they're stable and they're doing fine and aren't experiencing symptoms. Like, I haven't been experiencing bipolar symptoms for over a year since I've been on medication. So I literally could be undiagnosed with bipolar disorder if it weren't a lifelong diagnosis. I basically live like I don't have it, with the exception of having to take medication every day. I would also like to say to the people who are always commenting this, that if you're scared of your doctors having bipolar disorder and you think that makes them bad doctors or unable to treat people, I would hate to inform you just how many doctors do have bipolar disorder and are practicing currently. Anyway, thank you guys for listening to my Q&A. If you have any other questions, please drop them below. I will be doing another one of these because there are still so many questions that I haven't answered from my TikTok comments. And I get more questions every day. So I will be making a part 2. But if you would like anything to be included or addressed in part 2, feel free to comment it down below and I will answer it. Love you guys. Cheers!